So Carrie, welcome back to the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast. I think is this our third or fourth conversation now?
Yeah, it has to be the 3rd or the 4th. I mean, we've known each other for so long. It's hard to remember each instance that I've done this podcast. It's at least the 3rd, possibly the 4th.
Well, that's the thing is I should probably just get on your schedule and have this scheduled at least once a quarter because if it's not when I'm working with families with couples, um, it's either money, kids, or their career. Those are the top three sticking points with uh pretty much every couple I've ever worked with in the almost 20 years I've had my firm and done this type of work. And so today is no different. And now I've got three or four families going through this situation right now. And so here I'll set it up for you and the audience is
Okay.
that these families are going through difficult time because all the spouses, husband and wife, they all have careers. They all have jobs, but they're
You mean dual
not.
income? Are you saying they're dual income
Yep,
families or?
dual income
Okay.
families. Yep. So both partners, both spouses are working, and what's not working is that one spouse or partner does not like their job and or career because I talk about it in two different things. Your career is one aspect, your job is another. So you could like your career, like I'm in sales and I like being in sales, but I'm in sales at company X, Y, and Z, and I don't like company X, Y, and
Yes.
Z,
Mhm.
as opposed to I'm in sales and I don't want to be in sales. I want to be in finance, which is kind of like your specialty with Purple Squirrel, I should say. Um,
Yeah.
and so I distinguish. I try to get to the root of like, are you unhappy with your career or are you unhappy with your job? And for
Yeah.
the most part, these people are unhappy with their job. They don't like either the work environment, they don't like the company.
Mhm.
It just doesn't work anymore. And so the the thing that people struggle with is time. And I don't know if you have the answer to this, but I knew of all people, I wanted to pose a question to you. Is the feedback that I get, it's like, well, after I work 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day, I come home, I have to help manage the household with the kids because mostly everybody has two or more kids. Like you've got three, I've got the triplets plus one.
Yeah.
Like at 9 o'clock, I'm like exhausted. Like the last thing I want to
Yeah.
do or think about is like doing a job search or a career search. What help us like walk us through like how can we help people in this situation facing, and I call it this all the time, we're always facing all these multiple financial and emotional and personal priorities tugging at us, and our career is one
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah, that is a super difficult question. I think time management, I mean, is something that a lot of people struggle with. So, I mean, first and foremost, though, I think having the conversations and really openly talking with the spouse and good friends and advisors like yourself about what's going on, I think is really important. I saw a post on LinkedIn recently that stated that more than 50% of people who are unhappy in their jobs or are conducting a job search keep it a secret from their loved ones or their best or their close friends. And that
Oh,
was to me a
wow.
little shocking. I can't
Yeah.
wrap my head around that because I feel like most of the time when we're dealing with our candidates absolutely make a reference to, friends or significant others who may be involved in the decision. So I found it kind of shocking that this post referenced a study that a lot of people are sorry, my watch just started giving me a time, which is very strange. But anyway, I think it's, first of all, shocking that there would be so many people that would keep it hidden because it is, and it's such a consuming topic if you're unhappy in your job where you spend so much time. Um, so my first piece of advice would be to to make sure to talk to friends and family and people that can maybe provide some guidance. And I know a lot of people, if they're depending on how busy their job is, it's not like they could, and just a moral obligation. They want to be committed to the work that they're doing while they're there, even if they don't like it. But if they get a lunch hour, you could go somewhere quiet with your computer and, take your, maybe work on something job search related over a break or a lunch hour. um Taking even a day off just to get that reboot of, taking a vacation day if you need to, and meet with like a career coach or talk to some recruiters, do something to kind of get that job search jump started. Because I think if you dedicate, some time on the front end, it gets a lot easier from there, getting your materials together, your resume, and some of those kind of front end basics. And then there's easy apply on a lot of jobs, so you can start submitting applications. It doesn't have to be too time consuming once you've got your front end work done. So I don't know if that helps, Paul, just for some kind of early stage advice
No, I
with the
think it
job
does. And
search.
that's a really interesting stat because I would think that, you need you want, and probably more so need, your spouse's or partner's support and going through this, because
Yeah,
more than likely, because I talked to both sides of it, and and the person that's not searching for the job or career is frustrated with the other spouse or partner, because all they're getting is like the negative feedback every day about how awful things are, and it's like, okay, well, if things are this bad, then we need to make a change. um
exactly.
I there's this phrase that comes into my mind right now, is that it's easier to find a new job when you already have an existing job. Is
Yeah.
that is that true? Do you think that
Well,
holds
I think what
water?
that's referencing is like, so there's a couple of things I think with searching for a job while you have one. Um, there can be a stigma associated with unemployment.
Mhm.
And it's funny that you bring this up because I was going to be posting a blog today about transitions and the assumptions that some people will make about a job transition or unemployment. And I think it's oftentimes a really unfair bias against these situations. And so our conversation is timely in the sense that I was going to post about it today. Um, Becoming unemployed or having a transition, those things can happen for a lot of really good reasons,
Mhm.
and so my post is really saying, hey, let's not um, make an assumption. Let's have a conversation, have a conversation with that person to understand why they've ended up in the situation that they're in, or why they made those, multiple transitions over a short period of time, or whatever the case may be. But I think what that is getting at is that, you know, partly the bias against being unemployed. You're going to have a better negotiating position. I think the belief is that you'll be in a better situation to negotiate, and there's not going to be any sense that like you're desperate for a position, which I don't
Right.
like any of these stigmas or saying it, but I think that there can be a perception, that there's something going on as to why they ended up employed, that might not be as good of a candidate. And so that's, I think, where that comes from. And uh and I think every person's situation is unique, which I'm also going to reference in the blog I post. But um if you're working, then it can also give you a different lens to view your new potential employers, because you want to be as objective as possible. And so there's that idea of like running towards something or running away from
I was
something.
just
It's
going
the
to
same
say
type
that.
of thing. Yeah. So I think, when somebody is not feeling that sense of pressure, they can be more discerning on, like, is this job really better? Can I have a career with this opportunity, or is it just another job? So I think it's that difference between job and career and thinking long term. And we at Purple Squirrel, we really try to look for somebody where it's a good match for what they're looking for. It's not just a job. It's somebody that is going to go in, like, there's going to be a good match in terms of what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve with their career and this company. So looking at some of those elements of fit that go beyond, the responsibilities. And I think that you can have a little bit of breathing room when you're still employed, versus, finding yourself where you're in a panic of, I need to
Right.
get a job.
I don't know what the exact number is, but given like what you guys do at Purple Squirrel, you guys are a boutique recruiting firm.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10 jobs, people land because of their network, because they know somebody. And it's not really they know somebody, it's that they know somebody that knows somebody that potentially knows somebody, like what we call that, like degree connections.
Yeah, or like the 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, or, there's all
Yeah.
the yeah.
So if you have an existing job, how do you utilize LinkedIn to help either foster that network or find people that could help you get to that landing spot? Because I'll see people that, and I share posts of people that share that, hey, I'm looking, I'm been
Mhm.
part of a reduction in force or something like that. And so I'm always empathetic to those people. Like I may not know them very well, but I'm always like resharing their posts and saying, hey, if you know anybody, please contact so and so. But obviously,
Right.
if you already have a job, you can't do that.
You
So,
can't be so public, yeah.
right. So, how do you utilize like networking and LinkedIn to help put yourself in a good position to find something rather than just applying for a job?
Yeah, so the open to work setting, so there's 2 ways to utilize the open to work setting. There's the really public way of kinda signaling that you're open to work, that puts the banner, and it's very public. But
Mhm.
there's a back end setting too in your profile where you can say, "I'm open to work, but I only want, like, recruiters to know." And so that way, if you use that more discreet function of open to work, when we as recruiters are looking for people, one of the buttons we can push is like, hey, show me the people that are open to work first. And so like it'll show us, like, we'll use different criteria, and on that topic it's really important to have a well built out profile. And in your open to work settings, choosing not just job titles that you've had before, but job titles that you would seek. If you put those in your open to work setting, so let's say, for example, I'm looking for a VP of marketing. Let's say the person is currently a chief marketing officer or a director. If they would also, because depending on the company, the job responsibilities might be appealing with a different title. And so let's say, for example, the person's currently a CMO, but when in their open to work settings, they say, I'm interested in VP of marketing positions or VP of sales and marketing, or, listing a few different titles for the open to work. Then when we are searching, we'll use title as one of the factors that we're searching for. Will That person will come up in our search if they've got that title listed either in their profile or in their open to work settings, just as one example. Does that make sense?
It does. And I didn't know if that was a function or not. So if somebody does that, can their current employer still see that they're open
No,
for
so
work?
it's hidden, and LinkedIn has some sort of firewalls that prevents, even like, so for example, if I work at Google,
Mhm.
and I am open to new opportunities and I click it in the back end settings where it's private that only recruiters can see it, Google recruiters cannot see the Google employees that have the
Okay.
open to work setting. So they do things to try to protect the confidentiality of the job seeker.
That's 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 awesome. That actually puts my mind at ease because I think that is a really good feature. Um, so as far as going back to like networking, obviously when you currently have a job, it's hard to go out and potentially make those connections. Do you have any advice on how people can do that while they're still working?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think having a network, being active with your network when you don't need it, is one of my top pieces of advice there. And so, for
Yeah, I think you've
example,
told us that many times
yeah,
before, like probably every
yeah,
time we've had
being
a
involved in
conversation.
industry groups is a great way, because that should benefit any employer you have too. For example, I'm heavily involved with Financial Executives International, which is FEI,
Mhm.
and I'm also involved with ACG, which is
ACG,
Association
yeah.
for Corporate Growth. And so FEI as an example, that's a place where, controllers, VP of finance, CFOs
My
can
old
come
world.
and network with their peers and learn, so we have learning sessions and, where they can stay up to date, and they earn CPE credits also, by the way, if they're a CPA. Being a part of association or trade groups like that is highly beneficial. It should be supported by most employers because there's a value to them for you to continue to be in the community, have a peer group, and maintain learning on trends and best practices that your peers are seeing in other companies. And so I would say, and there's groups like that for different functions. And so being involved in those groups is very, very positive and beneficial, I think, for the career, because then when you do need to tap into your network for a new opportunity, it's not like you're starting at zero. So that would be my first piece of advice. And then, there's oftentimes events and networking opportunities, over lunch or at the end of the, after hours. So, a lot of these events do happen in the evening. Like, so for example, ACG, we vary our events. They're either, we have early morning events, we have midday events, and then we have evening events. So I feel like if somebody's really committed to the networking piece, they're going to be able to identify time and place to go and do those things and connect with their peers.
Is it, kind of getting back to the whole like spousal support? Is it good just to let people like just start letting people know, hey, like I'm looking, like I'm open for a new opportunity?
I think so. Yeah. And again, you never know where you might have a conversation
Yeah.
that leads to an opportunity. So for example, even like my kids are on a swim team, and part of a swim club during the summer. And I think I've had a conversation poolside with somebody where they've maybe shared something like that with me. And I'm like, oh, hey, well, did you know I'm a recruiter? Like, hey, send me your resume, or maybe I can make a connection for you. So, they may or may not have known, what my business was when we started having that conversation. So I would think that um you just never know. I mean, it could be another parent at your kid's school. You just don't know who's going to have the connection that could lead to an opportunity. I've placed numerous people that I know personally, um because they were open with me about their goals and their search process.
Yeah, I think that's, and I've never really put that two and two together with our like with what you do as a recruiter and what I do as a financial advisor. I tell people all the time, like, this is the most serendipitous industry I've ever been a part of. Like, just how randomly people just knock on my door and are asking me for help. I'm like, who are you and where did you come from? Like I never
Yeah.
really know like how people get to me, but like once they get to me, then I can peel back the layer and understand like, okay, why? Like, why are they finally seeking to work with a financial advisor? Or in your case, like why somebody's reaching out
Mhm.
to you as a recruiter to find their next career opportunity. So sticking back to like the network for a second, is there a right way or a wrong way to ask your network for help, whether it's in person, like say at these events that you're just describing, or probably more importantly online, like in on LinkedIn, like because it's easy to connect with people
Yeah.
there, to reach out and to send a whatever they call it, the in mail or whatever as an introduction. But is there a right or wrong way to utilize that?
Well, first of all, I think reaching out and making it personal, and making sure that there's some personal element to the request. So, and then also being sensitive to the fact that the person receiving the request might also have a really busy schedule. So not assuming like, hey, can I get on your calendar tomorrow? So, I think that sometimes I do get messages that are a little assertive of like, um, please let me know 30 minutes that you're available to meet in the next several days. And I'm like, wow, like, sure, I'm happy to meet with you, but like I'm traveling, or you know what I mean? Like, so I feel like just taking a little bit of like being a little bit softer in terms of
Mhm.
like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. What's your, how does your schedule look? I would really appreciate, us getting, 30 minutes on the phone, on the calendar in the next, couple of weeks. Cause while it's urgent for you, you can't assume it's urgent for the person
Right.
on the other side, and they might have a busy schedule that they're juggling too. But I would say on the topic of networking, years ago when I first moved back to Detroit from Chicago, I read a book called The Go Giver. And I don't know if
Yes.
I've mentioned this before on your podcast, Paul, but I think going into any networking situations with the mindset of like, um, I'm asking for help, but I can also lend help, and so thinking about I'm going to be asking for something, but there's reciprocity there. So, if I can help you in any way, I've got a broad network, so kind of thinking about going into that ask with what you have to offer them as well, I think is always a good mindset. So I like to say, like, thinking about it as net giving, not networking. And so when I first moved to Detroit, I didn't have a lot of clients. I had, not a lot to offer from a standpoint of like true making placements. But I thought about the way I could help people was with their resumes and, different kind of more background job searching type activities. And so did a lot of kind of pro bono resume reviews and things like that, just to try to be helpful to people thinking someday maybe I'm going to need their help. And I hope that they'll remember I helped them type of thing. And so I think thinking about what you can give to your network versus what you can get can reframe those conversations and really set up stronger and deeper connections as well.
It's funny you mentioned the Go Giver because we both know Rich Spriegel, and Rich, who I think he was like one of my early guests too, like almost 4 years ago, like you were. And
Yeah.
that's how I got a hold of that book, was the Go Giver. Like he gives that like out like
Yeah.
candy. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
I'll
I'm
make sure
connected to Bob Burg, the author, on LinkedIn. It's kind of cool to, um, you know, I've referenced that book for probably 10 or 12 years now.
yeah. Well, I'll make sure to put a link to it in the show notes so people can get a hold of it. Um, the other thing I kind of liken, what you do with what I do is that there's always a lot of people are like, I feel, are paralyzed by this fear of the unknown, of taking that first step, whether to work with financial advisors such of myself, or like reaching out to a recruiter like you, and taking that first, I guess, leap of faith. Like even people that are really unhappy in their job, there's still, I think, this other side of them, like, okay, well, is it really going to be better if I leave?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's easier to just stay and complain about your current situation. And as
Right.
I mentioned earlier, that can drive the other spouse nuts,
Right.
because they're the one hearing about, it's like, okay, well then do something. Do you have any, like, what would be like your insight or advice to get people to move, to take that first, maybe obviously emotional, but maybe potentially scary step?
Yeah. Well, I can think back to like experiences I had earlier in my career where I was with the company for almost 10 years, and I tried to leave a couple times. And it is scary because it's like I remember I actually submitted my resignation, and then the company came back and wanted to do a counter offer. And I remember being so confused, because I was so certain that I was going to make this move. And then it became more challenging when they gave a counter offer to me. And one of my kind of mentors at that company sat down with me and was like, listen, like, this is a decision between the devil you know and the devil you don't. And
He actually said that to you.
yeah, he did. And which was like, I mean, obviously it was probably 15 or 16 years, 17 years ago maybe. But it's something I've thought back on many times, and I think of it too when we've got a candidate who's in a situation of the counter offer as an example. And making that change is really difficult. Nothing's ever perfect, and so but it is the difference between the known and the unknown
Mhm.
when you're making a job change. And I think it comes down to like hope, and then how thorough you've been. Like, if you really, some people need a lot more from their job than others. Like, some people are happy with saying, you know it's fine, it's not my passion, but I'm good at it. I like it. But is it my passion and something that I feel like I want to jump out of bed and do every day? Like, that's not realistic for every person, you know? So I think there's different levels of like acceptance for what people want out of their jobs. And then other people need to have more of that fire and that passion for their job. So I think it's a little bit of like figuring out who you are as a person. Can you fuel your passion and, you know, all of those like inner things that are so important to you? Can you do those things outside of your job, or does it need to be within the job? But then I think the way to kind of get over that fear, I would say, is to have very, um, detailed questions in the interview process. Like, I don't really think once you're deeper into an interview process, I don't think any questions should really be off limits,
Mhm.
because, um, a good fit is a good thing for both the employer and the employee. And so if the candidate or the job seeker needs to ask some really, deeper questions to figure out if they're walking into the right type of job, I think that's a great thing, and we really appreciate it. Our clients appreciate it, because you'd much rather have awareness going in than get into the job and 2 to 3 weeks into it be like, wow, this is like completely different than what I thought it was going to be. And so I would say, if there's nagging questions as you're considering an opportunity, don't be afraid to ask, and do whatever you can to get the answers to figure out and get more clarity on the decision.
That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wasn't thinking of this question until you just referenced the counter. But in situations where somebody can afford to say, you know what, I just cannot be here anymore. It's like toxic environment, whatever it may be. Like, I'm going in, I'm going to resign. I don't have anything else lined up. How do you deal with that type of situation often? And if so, like, what is the going back to that whole, like, maybe like negative stigmatism that you had mentioned earlier about not having a job? Does that play into this at all? Because I'm going in to say I'm done, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, no, we don't want you to go. Like,
Mm,
here's this. Will you stay?
right. Yeah, no, we deal with this, I mean, regularly. Thankfully, doesn't happen all the time, but I would say we see it maybe on 10 or 15% of the offers that we make. There's some sort of counter offer situation. Sometimes it's higher, but I mean, that could be low. Maybe sometimes we don't even hear about it because the candidate is so certain that they're going to make the move that we don't hear about the counter offer. But
Okay.
it's something we talk about all the time with our candidates, because rarely do our candidates are people looking just because of money. It's usually a variety of reasons why people are looking to make a job change. They
Isn't
don't
that
like the
interesting
culture.
how that's changed over the decades? Because, like, we're similar in age. I think you're still younger than I am, but like, I could think back to like my early 20s, my first career, like that was like the main driver. Like, but
I mean,
now
it
it's
can
not.
be, but like now it's really, I feel like it's rarely is it purely about money. It's about lack of upward mobility, promises broken, bad culture, toxic boss. Like, it's a lot of other things, or fear about the company's stability. I mean, just there's so many reasons why people look for a new job. They're bored. I mean, who knows? It could be anything. But it's rarely is it just money. And by the way, like, it's a little bit of a concern for me, especially with the level that we're working at, is if we ask a candidate, like, kind of, why are you looking to leave? If it's purely about money, they're going to leave our job for money
Right,
also. And it
exactly.
worries me a
Yeah.
little bit of like, well, if there's not some deeper reason that's prompting you to look for a new job, then I often worry like, okay, somebody's going to call and they're going to offer $10,000 more and they're going to jump ship. There needs to be something deeper than money from my perspective. And there usually is. And so, but on the counter offer, it's usually the first thing that's offered is more money. And so money is not the reason they're leaving, but money is going to be the reason they stay. Or, it's money and, oh, I'm so sorry. We've made you these promises that we haven't kept. We're going to keep them now, and we're going to give you that promotion. And my counter to that is, well, why did it take you leaving
Leaving.
to all of a sudden them the company wanting to honor the prior commitments, or for them to recognize your value? And so that would be what I would say to the candidate is, gosh, when you told us that you were looking to leave, it was because of these 5 things. Um, I'm sure you've expressed your disappointment, before. doesn't it concern you that the company is willing to kind of take the step forward only now because you're leaving? And a lot of times companies will make the counteroffer because they want to replace the position on their terms, not on yours. And then there's the question of loyalty, and it does, I think, put the person at risk to accept a counteroffer, because when the company has a chance to kind of maybe replace that position, they they're going to do it on their own terms. Um, in some cases, I'm not saying all, but that would be a worry that I would have.
Yeah, you just listening to you go through that scenario. I remember back in my corporate career, I did that once, and I regretted it. Like within like I think 1 or 2 weeks after like deciding to stay at the company rather than go, I'm like, that was a bad move. And like six
Yeah.
months later, I was gone. So
Yeah. I mean, I actually did accept the counteroffer too. And I regretted it. I mean, it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. It was more money, but I still was unhappy in my job. And so I ended up leaving shortly thereafter anyway, within a year or two. And so I think it's just accepting a counteroffer can be it's like a band-aid that you're
mhm.
putting on the problem.
So as we wrap up, is there any last parting words of wisdom or actions that somebody should take, given they're in their situation where they want to make a change, but they're just having a hard time getting going?
My My suggestion would be to make the front end investment, because it gets a lot easier after you've got that front end investment of time. And so what I mean by that is, getting the resume ready to go. That is often, I would say, such a hurdle for people to get started with their job search. So blocking, whether it's a half day on the weekend or taking a vacation day and, working on the resume, or hiring a resume writer. I would say there's, some great resume writers out there, and they can help to even unlock some of the things that like just aren't coming to mind for you, asking the right questions on your job responsibilities and achievements so that you can get that resume to the point where you need it. And so investing time and money on the front end is really going to pay dividends throughout the search. And so that would be my suggestion, is just taking that first step and making that time investment, and then it's a lot easier from there.
So if you're not already connected with Carrie on LinkedIn, because that's mainly where she hangs out. Um,
Yeah.
I'll put her link in the show notes. So please connect with Carrie. Her company Purple Squirrel offers a whole lot of resources that we've kind of covered throughout the conversations that we've had. And Carrie, I can't thank you enough for coming back on. And I'm sure we're recording this in early August, and I'm sure I'll have you back on towards the end of the year to talk about the job market again, where we're at, and
Yeah.
what we're gonna look forward to in 2025.
It sounds great. Yeah, it's going to be a interesting rest of the year, I think, with things changing in the economy, the election. So yeah, it'll be nice to reconnect with you towards the end of the year, Paul.
All right, thanks, Carrie. I appreciate it.
Thank you.